Welcome to the January 17th, 2023 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda provided. Mr. Leonard, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Commissioner Gibb-Randall? Commissioner Abrams?
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé? Commissioner Mills?
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Here.
Commissioner Dish?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Weich?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move to approve the agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda moved by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? The motion carries. On the agenda, I see approval for minutes from November 15th and December 6th, but I believe we only received November 15th. So
Yeah, my apologies for that. Just the action should only be relative to November 15th minutes.
Great. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes for November 15th? Moved by Commissioner Dish, seconded by Commissioner Weich. Any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next, we move to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers, and committees. Councilmember Dish, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I do. From the January 9th meeting of council, I think we approved 530 North Division, or was that a first reading?
First reading. on the
First
zoning.
reading, okay, yeah, my notes are less good than they should be. We had a first meeting of the amendments to the UDC pertaining to stormwater management, and we had lots of fun talking about those. In fact, there was no comment. And we also, we approved the annexation on 2118 Victoria Circle, and we approved the annexations of 2520 and 2540 Pontiac Trail, which are additions to the Village of Ann Arbor acreage. And we approved the pros plan as well. So it was busy, but very short.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, do you have anything to report?
No additional report. Sorry, I take that back. Included in your agenda is one memorandum that has a response to some of the questions that arose during the capital improvements plan. So some of the items that were discussed have been addressed in that memorandum. Just attach that as part of reports. If commissioners have any additional questions on that, we can follow up as well.
Great. Thank you. Do other commissioner officers or committee liaisons have anything to report? Okay, so we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Is there anyone who would like to address the commission remotely, Mr. Leonard?
Yes. James Demore, you can unmute yourself and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Thank you, members of Planning Commission. This is James Demore. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Excellent, good. Actually, the primary purpose of this is because I'm not used to the Zoom function for the Planning Commission. I'm doing by phone before, and I had some trouble getting in before. My own concern is just naturally the issue regarding natural systems and the protection of trees, and you hear a bit more about that this evening. But I want to thank the commission for being available, and I look forward to hearing more comments. And that's it for now. I'm gonna lower my hand.
Thank you.
No other speakers.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, public hearings scheduled for the next business meeting.
We have one new public hearing scheduled. This is for the February 7th Planning Commission meeting for 415 West Washington, Planned Unit Development Rezoning and Concept Plan. A petition to rezone the 2.5 acre parcel from PL Public Land to Planned Unit Development PUD. The concept plan shows 157 residential units in a building constructed above floodplain elevation, surface and understructure parking, public open space, including construction of a segment of the tree line trail through the site.
Thank you. We're now moving to item 8, regular business. We have one petition on the agenda, public project review for 2415 South Huron Parkway, proposed new 12,097 square foot fire station to replace existing. And we'll begin with a petitioner presentation.
And if I could just jump in very quickly before we turn the petitioner loose. So as a reminder, this is appearing on your agenda as a public project review. This is in response to a city council resolution that was passed in the past that requires Planning Commission review and advice on any public projects that would exceed an estimated $250,000, but if they were being conducted by a private development would require review under the zoning ordinance. So this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to review the proposed project in the context of if it were private development, provide advice to the city council on that, to aid the city council in considering the ultimate advancement of this project. So I just want to set the stage. You are commenting on its consistency with the ordinance, not a typical approval or recommendation of approval or denial of the site plan. And with that, take it away.
All right, good evening, Commission. Mike Kennedy, Fire Chief, City of Ann Arbor.
Don Berry, I'm the architect of record.
So we're doing a bit of a hybrid with, we're here, we've got some folks remote for us driving the presentation. So I've heard brevity is key, so that will be the driving force here. This project was part of the capital improvements project that all of you recently approved. So this has been part of that for the better part of 4 years now, and was recently as part of that update. If we could go to the next slide, please. Project team, I don't know, Don, if you want.
Yeah, we've teamed with a firm out of Seattle, TCA Architects, that specialize in net zero fire stations. They did the first one in the country and the second one in the country, and I think the next several after that. So we've brought them in as experts to get to net zero. I'm from A3C, we're the local representatives. PEA Group is our civil engineer. John Curry is on running the slides, and he's available for questions. PEA is the MEP engineers, and we have our mechanical engineer that's available for questions regarding systems and whatnot. And the rest you can read for yourself.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, so quick kind of orientation of the location. This is Fire Station 4 in the southeast corner of the city of Ann Arbor. It's on where Platte and Huron Parkway intersect, just south of Washtenaw Avenue. If we could go to the next slide.
I put this slide up here to show the process that we've gone through to get to this point. Just briefly, it's been nearly 2 years to get here, and the reason being that you'll see the design takes a portion of the parkland in Scheffler Park to take a little corner to get to the light at Platt and Huron Parkway so that we can get a drive-through station and control the light to exit safely.
All right, if we could advance 2 slides, please. So part of this with the park strategy, and I know the layout's a little busy to see there. The current station, we'll jump to in a second. Actually, can you go back one, John? I'm not sure if it's, okay, I apologize. Go back to that. My apologies for that. So this shows Scheffler Park. We did extensive engagement with the Parks and Rec following their normal public engagement process where all homes, I think generally it's whatever their normal parameter was, and it's escaping me right now, we went double that for the use of parkland. And this is a public posting notification with public outreach. There's actually still a website available that talks about the project. So we did significant, we did the flyers, again, followed all of the normal Parks and Recs outreach, where basically we engaged the public about, number one, the partial use of Scheffler Park, and the parcel that Fire Station 4 is on and Scheffler Park are all city-owned. This was procedurally not required. We could have just, it's all city property, we could have done this based upon the preference from city leadership and from the Parks and Rec. We did it anyway to show good faith. So the area that's needed for the outlet is currently a half-court basketball hoop, and Scheffler Park is kind of bifurcated by a creek. And so the part that we need is on the west side of the creek. There's currently a softball diamond on the east side of the creek. You'll see that there's 3 locations that were provided, with the preferred one, which is kind of in the bottom middle, because of some land balancing issues. That was what we had preferred, and that's also what the public came back as their preferred. The east part is apparently a small sled hill for children, and the west part is current parking that the local neighborhood wanted to keep. Part of the quid pro quo with this is this project, if funded, we would build a full court, multi-use court in place of the half court, which could use a little TLC and is in a bit of a state of disrepair. So this would significantly improve that part of Scheffler Park. And again, we've received nothing but positive feedback from the community about this. There was not a whole lot of engagement, to be very upfront, but the engagement that we did have, there was no opposition. So.
And just for your information, that's the size of a junior high school basketball court. Next slide, John.
Okay, so this is the current station. It was built in 1966. It's a bit shocking that in 66 they designed this to back in off of Huron Parkway. The fact that we don't have more traffic collisions is a bit of an astonishment to me. Our vehicles returning from quarters have to turn on their emergency lights, back in. Southbound traffic, there's a curve. The sight line is horrific, to say the least. So from a simple traffic safety perspective, this is poor at best. In 1966, there was no such thing as female firefighters. So this station was not designed with any sort of gender inclusive, no exercise facilities. We have far exceeded this from the health and safety of our current firefighters. There's an open sleeping area. I could spend the rest of the time talking about the inadequacies of that, but I will move on. So next slide. And then this is a proposed station. I'll kind of let Don.
Next slide, John. I think we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Just briefly, this is first floor. You see the drive-through apparatus bays, public areas to engage the park, and living areas downstairs. And next slide, John. And dormitories upstairs. Next slide. This is just to show that we designed this to also in the interest of firefighter safety. So the current station doesn't separate what we call hot zones from living areas. And so current research says that the incidences of cancer for firefighters are very high. So we're trying to avoid that. Next slide. For net zero, we're doing a ground source heat pump system. We're doing solar panels. We're doing efficiency in water. We're doing EV charging in the parking lot and prepping for future electric fire apparatus. And we're reducing the embodied carbon in the materials that we're using, and we're prepping for future battery storage. We found that to do that now would be cost prohibitive. Next slide. And energy use intensity. The average for Ann Arbor fire stations is 106. The current Station 4 is 127. And the benchmark nationally is 79. We're at an estimated design energy use intensity currently at 25. So that's how you get to net zero.
And real quick, this has the potential, as long as we get funded, to be the first net zero in Michigan and one of the first two east of the Mississippi. So kind of fingers crossed.
Assuming that we don't take too long.
Yes.
Next slide, John. Oh, this is just a plan in case we want to go back and refer to it during question and answer. And I think that's it for us, Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, staff presentation from Mr. Khan.
I don't have much more to add. Thanks very much. We were excited to review the project. It's really our first net zero proposal that we've seen for any public facility in Ann Arbor. We think it will be a demonstration project and has the potential to be here for a century or longer. And that's all I have to report. We do recommend the Planning Commission approve the motion regarding the public project.
Thank you. So we'll now move to the public hearing. So if you want, you could have a seat and we'll call you back up when it's time for questions. Thank you. So for the public hearing, an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed public project at 2415 South Huron Parkway. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during the public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Abrams. My name is Ken Garber. I live at 28 Haverhill Court. Yeah, this is a fantastic project, of course. The city's first net zero building. That means it will produce as much energy as it consumes on an annual basis. I'm really pleased that the city staff has modeled the energy use intensity for the building. Yeah, I think we should require this of every petitioner. It's basic knowledge and it's not hard to do. The big question I have about this project is the on-site energy storage or the lack of. I'm disappointed to hear that we won't have on-site battery storage. It sounds like it was a cost issue. I'd be interested in hearing what the calculus was behind that decision. I assume this means there's going to be a gas line connection for an emergency generator, but that's another question I have. And you know, I'm no expert obviously on this subject, but there are companies out there, for example, EnergyPort, that have installed lithium-ion battery storage systems for fire stations. I don't know if TCA Architects is familiar with them. If not, then you are with others. Be curious to know if TCA has done battery storage for their other fire stations or not. Glad to hear, though, that it sounds like there will be accommodation for future battery storage, presumably when it becomes more affordable. So that's a minor quibble. Overall, really happy with this project. I heard just now that a little conditionality to this project. As long as we get funded, this has the potential to be the first net zero building in Michigan. So just curious on, presumably this is federal funding. So I know the economics of the project probably aren't the purview of Planning Commission, but I'm curious about what we're waiting on to move this project forward. So those are my questions. Overall, really looking forward to seeing this project be made reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, is there anybody that would like to address the commission remotely?
There is. James Demore, you can unmute yourself and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Brent. This is James Demore again. I live on Maplewood Avenue, and I live 2 blocks away from Shepherd's Park. I walk my dogs there just about every day. And so I'm very familiar with this property, and I've been so in the 15 years that I've lived here. And it's interesting to see the park evolve over the years. We live in a single-family home since we don't share walls with neighbors. A few years back, Jeff Kahan will know this, I worked with him on the Northeast Area Plan. We were carelessly burned out of our apartment by careless neighbors on the 2nd floor. And we wouldn't be alive today without the help of the Ann Arbor Fire Department. So I'm grateful to them every day for the work that they do. And I applaud the fire department for what they do, and I appreciate their being willing to step forward on this wonderful project here. And I urge the Planning Commission to support this excellent project that's coming before you this evening. So I would say again to Chief Kennedy, thank you for all that you do. Well, I also mentioned about the planning process. I'm a former planning commissioner, so let me step into my former role as a planning commissioner for a minute. Mr. Garber had some concerns, I think, which are interesting. Let me throw a couple of mine here, which are nowhere near the scale of this. But I'll play planning commissioner and say that I'm glad that for the replacement of the basketball court, it's at the site where it is. But because I'm familiar with this park, I've been familiar with some trees that were planted there not long after I moved there. And I've seen them turn from seedlings into beautiful trees. And I see that 2 of them are being slated for removal. I would ask the commission, if they could, to find a way if we could keep those trees that are there. I think it's, I'd have to move my screen a little bit. I'm looking at page 10 of the site plan document. And I see 2 trees slated for removal on the closer end of towards Edgewood, which is one. I can't look at the numbers right offhand, but it's something to that effect. At any rate, if you can find it in your heart to keep those trees, I think we can work around it, since what we're talking about is just the mere placement of a basketball court. Maybe I'm not sure if a fence is necessarily needed for something like this. I'm playing with the weeds at this point, but if we're going to make changes, this is probably the only change I would recommend.
30 more seconds.
You have a we'll wrap it up here, Brent. I think we got a fantastic plan before us here. And with those changes I suggested, I urge your approval.
Thank you.
No other speakers.
Okay, I will now read the proposed motion.
And I will turn off the buzzer.
Thank you. Whereas the city administrator is directed to obtain comments and suggestions from the appropriate city departments with regard to certain city projects meeting private development regulations prior to recommending that city council approve funding for them. Whereas such projects are to be reviewed by the City Planning Commission prior to city council approval. Whereas the city administrator shall indicate which private development regulations are not being met for such projects. Resolved that the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission finds the City of Ann Arbor Fire Station Number 4 adheres to city private development standards, notwithstanding the following. The right-of-way screen along South Huron Parkway would be required to provide 230 lineal feet of landscaping. The project is providing 162 lineal feet. A total of 555 square feet of interior landscape islands would be required. The project is providing 540 square feet. 35 street trees would be required. 15 trees are provided. A 15-foot wide conflicting land use buffer would be required. The conflicting land use buffer has been provided where possible. Can I get a commissioner to move this motion? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Weich. We'll now move to discussion of the proposed motion. Is there anyone who would like to begin our discussion? Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. Again, I'm really excited to see this project come before us, and I feel like it has been on the CIP for a while. You've been working at it. It's great to finally see what it looks like and how, how it's going to achieve net zero. So I really appreciate that. What I'm curious is if staff, or maybe along with the petitioner, can walk us through each of those 4 deviations from the private development standards, and help us understand kind of the challenges about why they're not achievable or in being met in this. So, I can read them off to you, or if you want to, whatever you prefer, Mr. Khan.
Maybe we should pull up the site plan sheet. I'm going to encourage the architect of record to join the discussion. The first one was the right-of-way screen along South Huron Parkway. Right-of-way screen is intended to provide a vegetative buffer for a non-residential project such as this. In this case, the project has extensive curb cut width to accommodate a one-way drive, so that there are 2 curb cuts. That limits the amount of right-of-way screening. I'm gonna see if the architect has any additional comments on that issue.
Yeah, and I may, if I could, call on our civil engineer to comment as well. The other issue that I see is sightlines, just for safety, the trucks coming out.
Got it. So would it be possible, whoever's driving, I don't know if you're able to show your mouse, point out where there is right-of-way screening along that, along kind of the road, and where there's not?
Yeah,
John?
I'm gonna grab the landscape plan and pull it in, that might help.
Thank you.
Okay. So part of the issue also is that because this is site planned for the existing fire station site and the entire park property, a number of these variations are the fact that the right-of-way screening and the street trees apply to the entire frontage of both Edgewood and Huron and Platte along the property boundaries. So as far as what you're screening for, a majority of that is park. That's part of the reason. And also, as Don mentioned, sightline. That corner, as Platte turns into Huron, there is a sightline issue around that corner.
Got it. And just to be clear, we wouldn't normally have the right-of-way screening from a park. Like, we want that to be visible and not screened from the road. So those things together, okay.
Right. And if I may, that's also the answer to the number of street trees question.
Okay.
Because we're including the entire frontage of the park there. And through discussions with staff, it was determined that we would just do the street trees in the areas that were affected.
Okay. And I was just going to ask that as a follow-up question. The staff that keeps an eye on the street trees that we have are comfortable with this? Okay, super. Landscape islands?
The landscape island square footage was minimized in part because of a desire to shrink the size of that parking lot to as small of a footprint as physically possible. It could be expanded a little bit to accommodate the extra 15 feet or maybe what might turn into 20 feet. But I think the intent was to keep it as small as possible so that the amount of impervious surfaces would be minimized. I'll defer to Don and Jonathan if they want to add anything to that.
John, do you have anything?
No, I think the other thing too was, part of that was that the bio retention area kind of eats into that a little bit. And it is such a small lot. I mean, usually we've got a big lot, you've got numerous islands and peninsulas and stuff, and the lot is so small that there's only a couple little areas that qualify as that parking lot landscaping. So you can see there's a lot of landscaping around that parking lot. It's just a matter that the definition of that criteria, it doesn't all meet it except for these little corners.
Okay. And then the landscape conflicting land use buffer. I would just note that in preparing for tonight's meeting, right when I went through the notes from the previous, the minutes from the previous meeting that we approved tonight, what I put into the record was, hey, let's reconsider the conflicting land use buffer again, because this comes up an awful lot. So why is it required? Where would it be required? And and here it is again showing up as not really workable.
Right. It is required when properties abut residential uses or parkland. In this case, the petitioner and their design team is working with a triangle, which is a terrible a site to work with. There's just not a lot of efficiencies here. And so in this case, portions of the significant portions of the building and access drives are encroaching in areas that would otherwise accommodate a conflicting land use buffer. The petitioner did successfully provide it where they could, but looking at the site holistically in terms of how to fit every single aspect of this facility, the design team was very challenged, but again, did provide the conflicting land use buffer where they could. I'll defer to Jonathan if he wants to see if he wants to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it, Jeff. I think I've traced and read the property boundary of the actual fire station site. As you can see, to the south, we're kind of
John,
blending
we're
in
not
with our-
seeing it.
I was just going to
you're
say,
not?
yeah, maybe we're looking at something different than you are.
What are you seeing right now? Let me,
We're seeing that part of the slide presentation.
okay, let me,
We're seeing the
have you seen
overall
anything about the
layout,
slide presentation?
the overall
Yeah.
dimensional layout plan is up.
We have not seen anything other than the slide
Oh.
presentation,
Okay, I've
so.
been showing you lots of stuff. Let me, I'm sharing. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
It
Yes.
is. Take us on a tour
Okay.
too, if you can show, there was something before that you said, maybe the landscape islands or something. Yes. Street
Okay,
tree.
sure.
Yeah.
So, to answer this latest question, this
Okay.
triangle is the fire station site.
Okay,
So, as you hit this little corner in the back, you're into wetlands and floodplain. Well, they're not a conflicting land with the commercial, but to this side, we're blending right into the park. So we provided landscaping sort of between our parking and the driveway and the park, and we kind of come right into the park. As it's not a whole lot of space in those areas to provide more screening than what we've got.
got it.
And
So
then
we are
let me see
running
that.
into, just to be clear, the problem is we are running into the situation where public land needs to be screened from public land because of our conflicting land use buffer. A
Well,
public
correct.
service, the fire station, needs to be screened from,
But as,
Right.
just, if I could just jump in, remember, we're evaluating this as if it were a private development. So,
Right.
So it's not public land from other public land. This is being reviewed as if the city had a private contractor running its fire protection services.
got it, okay. So in this situation, definitely makes sense. And also, I was kind of concerned that it was that, I don't know, the eastern property line, the eastern side of the wedge, yeah. Because I was like, that's ridiculous to screen from that. There's parking right up to the corner, like right up to the property line on the other side like that. Okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better about the conflicting land use buffer, to be honest. And obviously, this That's infinitely reasonable here.
Let me, this is where I was zooming in before for the discussion about the landscaped. I believe this. So I think, so here's the parking lot. Lots of landscaping all around it, but I believe only these crosshatch areas are the areas that meet the requirement for parking lot landscaping. So calculation-wise for that requirement, we're like 15 square feet short. But part of it also was this bioswale or bioretention basin comes into that area. And it's just such a small lot, there's not a lot of peninsulas or corners that meet that criteria.
Got it. So your options are to make it bigger, to add more green, but that eats into the park. Or, yeah, okay. Super, got it, makes sense. Thank you. So from my perspective, these are all reasonable. I mean, I think it's really, I like our practice that we say, are we holding ourselves as the city to the standards that we would hold private development to? I think in this case, all of these things, particularly because of this intersection with parkland, that's public property onto parkland, these all seem reasonable to me. And again, I think it's useful to see what it's difficult for us to achieve, to evaluate those standards overall. This does not suggest to me, like, it's not any worse for the conflicting land use buffer, but I still think that we do need to come back to that at some point. But I don't see anything in here which suggests, well, maybe this is unreasonable for, that would require changes to our standards overall, unless somebody else does, or, yeah. And then you can propose it during commission proposed business. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Dish.
Okay, I also want to just make sure that I'm understanding that there are a couple ways of making parking green, and one is to keep it small, and another is to put in landscape islands. So you're opting not to make it larger in order to make it greener, which da-da-da. Okay, that's...
Which would cause us to use more parkland and...
Yeah. Okay, so is there any difference between a junior high-sized basketball court and other basketball courts?
Yeah, high school's bigger, you know.
Oh, okay.
It's full-size. It's a slightly downsized version because the facilities in junior highs just aren't as big.
Okay, and so it's you're replacing an aging half-court with a full court.
Oh, and that's the park standard as well.
Oh, it's the park standard is a junior high size court?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that yet. Okay. All right, so I did want to ask, return to some of the questions that Mr. Garber posed. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about, has TCA done battery storage for other fire stations that they've designed? Is it a financial constraint that precludes it here? And will that create a need for a gas line for an emergency generator?
I don't recall them telling us whether they have on other projects. I do recall him commenting on the expense being prohibitive. But I would actually call on our engineer to respond to your question about, I mean, they looked at it, and we had discussions with Dr. Stoltz regarding it, and she'd like to see them too. We'd like to see a future microgrid in that area that we could hook up to. But that not being the case yet, we did look at it, and our engineers looked at the expense of it. And I would ask, Aaron, are you there? Could you comment on?
I'm promoting Aaron France, should be joining the meeting here shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I'm here. I think Zoom crashed when you hit that. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. Hi, yes, Aaron France with Peter Basso Associates Consulting Engineers. So the design team has been engaged with Dr. Missy Stoltz in terms of the city's expectations for sustainability and local carbon emissions. This has been a lengthy design period, and we met with her in January of 2022. To the point of the batteries, they are going to be appreciably expensive, and right now the focus is just to make sure that we have a station that's going to be within budget, because as was acknowledged during the presentation, the EUI of the existing station is something in the neighborhood of 125. By going down to our proposed station, if we can make our design current goals of 25, you're making a 80% improvement in overall energy efficiency even before batteries, which is huge in terms of broad energy savings. With Dr. Stoltz's direction, the design team has been proceeding in a realm of batteries if we can, but if constrained by budget, just making it battery ready. So the designs of this project are going to be evolving, subject to funding, subject to city approval, and we will be looking at there. But right now, our initial reaction is that the batteries are going to be out of budget, but it absolutely will be ready for it. To the point of the gas meter, it was understood that having a gas meter on site was not something the city was interested in, just from a values point of working towards a decarbonized future. We investigated what it would take to use batteries for the standby power that would be required for this, critical infrastructure building by building codes and by fire department regulations. And batteries similarly were non-viable. What is presently proposed is a propane tank generator, propane fired generator. What that would allow is that if the price of batteries can come down, and if the carbon impact of producing those batteries can come down, then the propane can be removed from the site without tearing up the paving. If a resilient microgrid can be developed in the area, which has a level of operating reliability that is acceptable for what is needed for a 24/7 resilient through power outages fire station, then the propane could be removed. But there will be no natural gas brought to the site.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. I also really appreciate your doing the math around that slide went very quickly, but doing the math around the 80% improvement in EUI, even without batteries, that's a very impressive thing to put forward. I appreciate the explanation about the propane-fired backup tank. I wanted to ask, it seemed like there was something else, but I did want to know if you all had thought about more than 4 bicycle hoops, or if you don't think they're useful. I think that's what I read in the description, that there would be 4.
Honestly, I need Shannon to answer that.
Yeah, I believe there's 4 at the fire station side of the park, an additional 2 with 2 bikes per loop at the Edgewood side.
Gee,
So
well,
6 total loops, 12 possible bikes.
yeah,
It is
so
on that bike path. But
the Edgewood side is by the basketball court, so maybe there would be some utility to having more there, unless there are some lots in the park that, there are several in the park that I'm not seeing because we're so zoomed in. It's just a question, I'm not, yeah.
I don't have an answer for you. I'm sure she did, but I would need Shannon to confirm that.
Further discussion? Oh, Commissioner Clark.
Hi there. So this might be a little, I'm just curious if there are any resilience measures incorporated into the site. I saw, ISTM, and there's other guides now coming out tied with critical infrastructure like fire stations being useful for things like water distribution in case of a water plant failure. I'm just curious if there's, I'm sure you've already considered that in the planning. Yeah, appreciate everything that you're bringing forward tonight, but just wanted to ask about that.
I'm sorry.
Clarify. So I was just asking about resiliency measures, things like water backup systems. It sounds like the propane kind of covers running and operating the facility. The reason I ask is just, I know that there have been other stations that have been really critical of, in other cities across country for things like first responding, especially water infrastructure and distributing to communities. And I'm just curious, more out of my own curiosity, if there's like a backup system for water, things like that.
I don't believe so, but Aaron, can you confirm that?
At present time, there is no redundant or backup water system. The extent of water considerations that have been made so far have been about site drainage and minimizing water use by the building itself.
I can speak to some resilience. So some community resiliency was part of the initial design plan. There was the balance of square footage, site location, a potential shared community center on the site, but that would have dramatically increased the square footage, thus dramatically increasing all these other requirements and dramatically increasing the cost. So that was deliberately by city direction, my direction, taken out just because the funding of this has been a big challenge, and I'll be very upfront about that. So the trying to keep costs down on this have been paramount, and this is currently an unfunded project. So we're trying to do the best we can with, right now, no funding, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioner Lee?
Sure, thank you. Looks like a great project overall. Obviously, net zero is pretty incredible. Just taking procedurally speaking, I know we're supposed to evaluate this as a private development. So looking at this from my standpoint, permitted use under the PL under table 5.15, I would think that it falls under government office, right? We don't really have a specific category, so I was like, I think this applies. So I think on a use side, we're fine. And then form development standards and massing, I don't think there are. It just says none across the board. So it was tough to say, hey, we're going to apply this pursuant to the UDC simply because it is a public land. But it looks to comply with both, so I don't see any issues there. I wanted to address the speaker's question about the tree removals. I saw that there's a wild black cherry and swamp white oak that is being removed. I think the speaker was speaking specifically to the 2 trees that are getting affected by the basketball court. And I was wondering if there is any way to potentially accommodate that speaker's request.
John, can you speak to that?
I wasn't 100% clear exactly. He just said that I believe the speaker was saying 2 of the trees are being impacted and removed for the basketball court.
I think you're right, by the basketball court, yes.
So if there's a way to, accommodate, great.
I can't answer that definitively here and now, but we can certainly, with Shannon and Joe, my engineer on this, take a look at it and see if there's a way we can finagle that, get the volume and area we need in that basin and save those. We can take a look.
Yeah, I would hate for the solution to be moving the basketball court at this point, considering that we've gone through the community engagement and everything for that location. So, but yes, we should look at that.
Gotcha, understood. Thank you. If we could take a look, would be great. If not, I'm still in support of the project overall. I just want to recognize the commenter's wishes, since he does walk the site and traverses it frequently. Last item, just my comment. My understanding is the capital improvements prioritization plan is something we pass, and then city council is the one that allocates the funding. So I was wondering if anybody knew if there was any kind of federal funding. I think you had indicated that there is no funding currently for this, and it would have to be allocated by city council / grants. Is that correct?
Correct. So at direction from This project's been going on for several years.
Yep.
I had direction from some previous city administrators, along with Mr. Mahoney currently, who has supported our continuance of this. My marching orders were to have a shovel-ready project. So should funding become available, this is as shovel-ready as we can pretty much possibly get it at this point. It was in contention for the community allocation of the ARPA funds. It did not receive strong support for that, unfortunately. We are in the process of staff recommendation to the administrator for fiscal 24-25 improvements. This will be, not a surprise to anyone, will be part of my proposal, but costs are only going up with inflation. We're expecting this is going to be every bit north of 10 million at this point. So that's a tremendous amount of money, and as with all city projects, 10 million for this is 10 million not for something else.
Sure.
So this truly becomes we've gotten this to the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
And it's just whether or not there's federal funding. In terms of grants, there's really not a grant program for this sort of stuff, like specific to fire stations. We've, some of the federal infrastructure, I know city leadership has been looking at that. As to this point, we have been unsuccessful of identifying federal sources. I think that if the city were to move forward on this, it's going to have to be through city funding. I'm not optimistic about external funding. I don't want to speak too broadly on that,
sure.
but I also don't want to say there's this path of federal funding that's available for this, because thus far we have not been successful with that, and we have been diligently trying, so.
Understood. Thank you for the comments. I think overall the project looks great. I think the energy use intensity improvements in themselves merit an improvement, the safety considerations, as well as kind of the antiquated nature, as you were speaking towards gender-neutral facilities for our firefighters. So overall, I think, again, use and form seems to apply pursuant to the UDC. The overall building mass and materials and the rendering looks to be in line. We don't have anything that's, crazy out of scale. Looks to continue well with the kind of environment. And so, yeah, overall, I think I'm in support. So thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. I just have, I think, a few clarifying questions. Quickly, back to the comment was made, no natural gas is being brought to the site. Is there natural gas there now? There is.
Street, yeah.
So are you going to be removing that?
Yes.
Cool, awesome, good answer. Okay, I also noticed kind of a lot of floodplain around the site. Is it your opinion, and maybe this is a Shannon question too, that the proposed stormwater detention is enough to sort of mitigate any impacts of like creek overflow, or like have you kind of sized it, because climate change and things are just getting rainier?
We have above-ground detention and below-ground detention for this, and John is really the best person to answer this.
Well, perfect.
Yes, we are. I mean, we're meeting all the city and county requirements for stormwater quality and volume. And when you're this close to the ultimate outlet, being the creek, yes, when you get a flood, it's going to back up the system, but really sort of the intent of detention is to hold it past the peak, so it doesn't, that's not an issue as far as it being close to the creek or the floodplain elevations. We've kept, also the building is kept a foot above the 500-year as required for fire stations, and we're not actually doing anything in the floodplain or wetland here.
Okay, great. I read in the staff report too, sidewalks are proposed to connect pedestrians directly to Scheffler Park. Where can somebody pull up a map and I was just curious where that is, because it looked like there were sidewalks. Are they new sidewalks?
This is, the existing are here.
Okay.
And the added sidewalk from the building is connecting
Oh, okay, okay.
into the park system.
Okay, thanks. And then, one of you mentioned something about when you were going over the floor plans, public areas to engage the park. Maybe I heard that wrong. Are there something about public areas within the fire station?
No, what I was talking about is the way it opens up.
Oh,
And
okay.
the entry to the fire station faces the park.
Okay. Oh,
So it's.
I get it.
It's meant
It's
to
like
be
engaging
friendly.
with-
And, you know, the amount of glass on the apparatus bay is really intended to do that as well.
yeah.
That didn't help us with net zero, but it's okay.
Right. I mean, overall, it's a beautiful building. I hope you get the funding. I mean, a net zero fire station across from a new net zero neighborhood is a really cool narrative. Maybe that could help in the, I don't know. You know, another way to make parking green is to use a permeable paving instead of whatever's being proposed.
Well, we were limited in the areas that we could do that just due to the weight of fire trucks.
But now you know about that new product, Chief Kennedy. So we'll try to prove that out before you get this built. But yeah, this is going to be a beautiful addition. I drive by that old fire station all the time, and it'll be great when it's replaced with this. Thank you.
Commissioner Lee?
Thank you. Just really quickly, this isn't a floodway zone, right? I just want to make sure, because as a critical facilities, it does, I was noting on section 5.142, critical facilities cannot be in a floodway.
John, can you confirm that?
Yeah, that we're not in the floodplain.
Okay,
either.
or floodway. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Weich?
Thanks for the presentation. Just looking at this as we were supposed to, I wanted to come back to Commissioner Dish's question about the bike racks, both the ones that you have adjacent to the fire station as well as the ones that you're proposing in the park. A couple things there. One, there is a better bike rack design that we should be advocating. It is the Boston Post sign bike rack. It allows you to attach pretty much any kind of bike to it, and they take up a smaller footprint, so you can put more of them in the space. The UDC says that if you were building a plaza, it'd have to be 96 square feet for every 2 bikes, but because this is not in that space, I don't think you're subject to that. Is that correct, Mr. Collin? And I guess it doesn't matter because you're not subject to any of the requirements for the bike. But if you were a commercial or non-city one, we would have a little bit more, and we would ask probably, instead of just Class C, that we would have better bike facility there. And especially since you're taking that half court away at Huron River Drive and Platte and moving it to the neighborhood side, having more facility for the folks who would use a bike, like kids, going down to the park and having a place to park their bikes and lock their bikes. I think it's not a huge cost. You've already dedicated the space. Putting a few more facilities in there for that purpose, I think is good. My church is right there on Platte, so I come in and come out of that space a lot. And people use that park all of the time, and they are playing basketball on the court, as you noted, that needs TLC. And so just because that facility is being moved, it may be easy enough for us to just get a little bit more bike parking there, or maybe hit up Parks and see, because we approved their plan too, and maybe they can lend you some money to get that established. So that was it. It was just the recommendation on the Boston Post design instead of the hoop design, because you can get a lot more of those in, and you can arrange them in a way that you could probably get about 10 to 12 bikes as opposed to just the 4 that you might be targeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a good suggestion, and the fact that it's easy to do makes it a great one.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments for discussion? All right. I'll just say I agree with all of the excitement around the project, and also hope that funding is secured. All right, Mr. Leonard, I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
All right, the motion as presented. Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
The motion is approved. So this will be forwarded to the City Council, compliant with that resolution.
Thank you. So moving on to agenda item number 9, this is our last opportunity for public comment, an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any issue not listed as a public hearing on this agenda, but really any issue, right? Anyway, sorry. We will first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely? Mr. Leonard?
You're moving so efficiently, I'm just going to take my time to respond to that to give a few seconds in case anybody would like to, which the answer is no.
Very well, thank you. Agenda item number 10, commission proposed business. Is there any commission proposed business from the commission? Commissioner White?
Not proposed, but just a question on the update from the review of the
Capital
comprehensive
Improvements
plan. What's that? Oh, whether we have any additional updates, because I think you mentioned that there were 2 finalists that you were looking at.
Oh, for the comprehensive plan?
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
I thought I said
So-
comprehensive plan.
Yeah. So the comprehensive plan, we received 7 proposals. The review committee, including Commissioners Hammerschmidt and Sauvé from the Planning Commission, and city staff have recommended 2 finalists for interviews. Those interviews will be conducted later this month. After that, we anticipate a recommendation. The 2 finalists that we are bringing into interviews at this point are Interface Studios and Housel Levine Associates. So those are the next steps. The next steps on the evaluation will be those in-person interviews. We're bringing the project teams on site. We will be hopefully having a productive interview session with them, maybe a little bit unconventional, but helpful. And like I said, hopefully my goal will be sharing at the conclusion of that, a recommended consultant to share that with both the Planning Commission and ultimately present it to the City Council for a contract consideration to get this exciting work going.
Is there how do I word this correctly? Is there any objection from staff to add a line item to our agenda where updates could just, like just a text update of like, okay, here's where we are, we have this part? Because it's just, otherwise, I feel like I'm always asking for information as opposed to, and since this is a big process, and the last time you mentioned the 2 folks, I had to go back and listen to the transcript to try to figure out which 2 it was and, to do all of that. So
You had to do the dreaded relive the meeting by watching it again?
no, actually, I did it in a more efficient way.
Okay.
I
You're better-
asked the
better
computer
than I.
to tell me what you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sure.
But let me take it a step further. Once we have somebody on board, we're going to be putting together a much more detailed project.
No, I know that. I know
And so,
that's
yeah,
coming.
for sure.
And there
Yeah.
will be a subcommittee and,
Yeah.
and we'll interface with them. And I imagine there will be reports, but just while we're still in this
Yeah,
part of
absolutely.
just a little text line that's like, hey, we have these meetings, because you say the end of the month.
Yep.
Like, when are they actually going to be scheduled? And
Yeah.
how does that all work? And how can people ask questions, stuff like that?
For sure.
That's all.
I'll start including that in the planning manager report as an update
Sure.
on that.
That's a great place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for a little bit more specificity, again, those interviews they're scheduled for January 25th and 26th.
Okay.
They'll be held here at City Hall. The format of that interview is we're going to actually sort of go through a bit of role playing, like have the consultant team actually run through a problem statement or an issue, because we want to see how they work through that process with our group. We're going to go through what I would say, more conventional question and answer period, and then we're going to talk to that team about a particular project more in depth. All of this is a little bit different, I would say, since the last time we went through this experience, where we had, I would say, a more perfunctory presentation by the proposed consultant teams. It was helpful. We learned a lot about them, but I found it personally to be a little bit repeating a lot of what we learned from them in the written proposal. So this is the evaluation team is trying to really get more to the heart of how are they going to function in our community? How are they going to function on their feet? What expertise do they bring to help problem solve? So these two were, I think, again, they're the highest rated. I think the team is really excited to have these conversations, but absolutely, I'll do a better job of being a little bit more proactive to
This
keeping
was not
the
a
commission.
criticism.
Yeah. No, I think it is appropriate, and then that's an appropriate transition until we get to that more detailed project plan, which we'll be able to share more details. There'll be schedules, and that'll be shared more publicly, of course, once it's developed.
Sure. And just one more follow-up, since I won't be able to interface with these two finalists before you select one. I'd like to ask, again, that as you do the role-playing, that you craft some kind of interface that asks these consultants how they would interface with children about our comprehensive plan.
Yep.
So how do we get the folks who are actually going to inherit the work that we're doing to have a voice so that they're not excluded from that? And I think it's vital for us to not just include youth, but actual children to this process. And children have a lot of insight because they used our planned environment a lot. And I have a 8-year-old who refuses to bike to school because the way that the road is designed, she doesn't feel safe. And every time we come to the intersection, she says, this intersection could be better if X, Y, and Z. And I go, will you come and tell us that? And she says no.
I was going to say, it sounds like she needs to run for office in a few years.
No, they're often embarrassed by me. That's their one thing. Please don't embarrass us.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of that is I've heard from other parents who try to use our planned infrastructure, like biking around the city and having to wait at extended times at lights in summertime, and then making maybe not the best decisions because you don't want to wait too long for the light, so you sort of run the light. So just how do we ask these consultants, at least these two finalists, how they would approach bringing kids into this conversation so that it's not just us that they're hearing from, but they're hearing from those who they are actually planning our city for. Not that we won't be here, but it's primarily for them, in case someone calls in and says something. Thank you.
Any other commission proposed business?
I would just like to echo that technically wasn't any proposed business.
There was no proposed. Any other comments? All right. I think we're on to item 11, adjournment. Moved by Commissioner Weiss, seconded by Commissioner Mills. All those in favor say aye. Raise your. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.